billionaire CEO hears screams and finds girl in shock. What she reveals makes him call 911 immediately. Before we begin, comment below and tell us, where are you watching from? Which city are you in? And when it's over, be sure to rate this story from 0 to 10. Enjoy the story. Nathaniel Harper, CEO of a billion-dollar empire, was the only soul left in the tower, 40 floors above the world. He believed nothing could touch him. Then came the scream, "Hi!" piercing, not from his building, but from somewhere down below. When he looked, a girl in a pink nightgown stood barefoot in the snow. Her eyes were wide with something beyond fear, and when he reached her, she whispered 5 words that would unravel everything he thought he knew. "He has a knife. I need to hide." The night it all began. The wind howled down Fifth Avenue like it had teeth, sharp, wild, searching. But Nathaniel Harper didn't hear it, not from the 40th floor. The merger papers in front of him spread across the mahogany desk like battlefield plans mattered more than the storm, more than the time, more than the cold coffee he kept sipping like it could save him. At 42, he was the youngest CEO in Harper Industries history. His father built the foundation. Nathaniel built the empire, real estate, hotels, power. But the truth, he hadn't felt anything real in years. His wife, Margaret, hadn't called in weeks. Their penthouse on the Upper East Side was full of things, not warmth. Art on the walls, silence in the halls. And when the tree branch slammed against the window, cracking the glass like a warning, he barely looked up. Then he heard it, a scream, high, feral, wrong. He stood, pressed his face against the window. Snow swirled like ghosts through the city below. And then he saw her, a small figure, curled against the granite wall of his building. No coat, no shoes, just a little pink nightgown and shaking knees. Nathaniel didn't think. He ran down 40 floors, past the startled security guard, through the revolving doors, into a wall of snow and wind that bit straight through his $1,000 coat. And there she was, a little girl, no more than 5, her lips blue, her hair matted with ice, her eyes, dear God, her eyes were wide with something beyond terror. They were wide with knowledge. He knelt beside her, careful not to startle. "Sweetheart," he said softly, "what are you doing out here? Where are your parents?" Her teeth chattered so hard she could barely speak. But then she leaned in, clutched his coat with trembling fingers, and whispered, "I need to hide. He has a knife." Time stopped. Nathaniel swept her into his arms, her body terrifyingly light, her skin like ice, her breath shallow. "Roberto," he yelled to the security guard, "call 911. Paramedics. Police, now." Inside the warm marble lobby, he wrapped her in his coat and sat her gently on the leather couch. Her eyes darted to the glass doors. Her whole body shook, not from cold, but from memory. "What's your name?" "Sweetheart." "Sarah," she whispered. "Sarah Michelle Thompson." Nathaniel's voice caught in his throat. He'd spent his life negotiating billion-dollar deals, but now, this little girl had broken him open in a way nothing else ever had. "You're safe now, Sarah, I promise." But even as he said it, she flinched, and then she whispered again, "Mommy's sleeping. She won't wake up." There was so much red. The sirens were coming, the lights flashing outside, but Nathaniel didn't see them. He only saw the red in her eyes. Not blood, but the memory of it, painted across her childhood. Chapter 1. The girl in the snow. She looked impossibly small, curled into one corner of the leather lobby couch. Nathaniel's coat swallowed her tiny frame, the fabric still damp from melted snow. Her feet, bare and reddened, dangled over the edge, not even touching the polished marble floor. He sat across from her, trying not to let the weight of her presence settle too heavily in his chest. She hadn't said much since they brought her in from the cold. Just her name, Sarah, and that single, chilling sentence, "He has a knife." The rest had come in pieces, like glass shards scattered across a floor. You couldn't pick them up without bleeding. She kept her eyes on the door, flinching every time it creaked or someone walked past too quickly. Nathaniel spoke softly, careful not to spook her. "Sarah, do you know where you live?" She nodded faintly, her voice no louder than a breath. "Brooklyn Heights." He blinked. That was across the bridge. In this storm, there was no way she could have made it alone. "How did you get here?" Her eyes moved to the floor. "I saw the tall building in Mommy's picture box. I thought maybe it would be safe." Something twisted in his chest, that a child had fled through a snowstorm in a nightgown with frozen feet. Toward him, a man she'd never met, because a photograph had made him look safe. The doors hissed open, and the cold air slipped in again. Uniforms flooded the lobby. EMTs, officers, men and women with clipboards and urgent steps. The moment the lights from the ambulance flashed through the glass, Sarah gripped Nathaniel's sleeve like her life depended on it. "Don't let them take me," she whispered. "You're safe now," he said, steady as he could manage. "They're here to help." "But what if he's there too?" Her voice cracked. "The man with the knife. He said he'd find me." Nathaniel didn't have answers, just instinct. He lifted her gently and walked beside the stretcher, ignoring the questions, ignoring the curious stares. He stayed close. It felt like the only thing he could do right. At the hospital, doctors checked her over. A young nurse tried to tempt her with a grape lollipop, which Sarah held but didn't eat. Nathaniel sat beside her bed, watching her tiny fingers trace invisible lines on the blanket. When the detective arrived, he was tall and lean, with sharp eyes and a calm voice that carried too much history. "I'm Detective Ray Morrison," he said, nodding to Nathaniel. "And you are?" "Nathaniel Harper. I found her outside my building." Ray's brows lifted. "And do you have any idea why a 5-year-old girl would run through a blizzard to your front door?" Nathaniel looked at Sarah, who had just started to drift off in the bed. "I don't," he said quietly. But she said she thought I'd help her. Detective Morrison didn't reply, but he didn't look away either. Later, while Sarah slept and the machines beeped softly, Nathaniel stepped into the observation room. A child psychologist was examining a drawing Sarah had made. Crude lines, red crayon scribbles, a tall tower, a man, a woman on the ground. "She's telling us the story," the psychologist murmured. "We just don't speak her language yet." Nathaniel stood at the glass, watching Sarah breathe. He didn't know why she'd chosen him, why she'd run all that way through the dark and snow. But she had. And now, she was his to protect, not because he had to, because something inside him had already said yes. And for the first time in years, Nathaniel Harper wasn't thinking about numbers, markets, or legacy. He was thinking about a little girl with haunted eyes, and the truth buried behind them. Chapter 2. What her eyes remember. The snow kept falling outside the hospital window, soft and constant, like the world was trying to cover everything up. But Sarah didn't blink. She sat upright in the narrow hospital bed, her back too straight for a child so small, her eyes fixed on the door, as if she were waiting for something to burst through it. Nathaniel hadn't left the room since they admitted her. Not when Margaret called, not when the board emailed, not even when a nurse politely offered to show him to the waiting lounge. He just stayed, hands clasped, coat draped over the chair beside her, watching this little girl watch the world. When she finally turned her head toward him, it was so slow and careful, it felt like time had shifted. "Is he here?" she asked. Nathaniel leaned forward. "No, sweetheart. It's just us." She looked back toward the hallway. He has boots, the loud kind. Nathaniel didn't know what to say to that, so he said the only thing that felt true. I won't let anyone hurt you. A pause. Then, you don't even know me. He gave her a soft smile. No, but you found me anyway. Her small fingers twisted the edge of the blanket. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Sarah said, Mommy had a box. A box, she nodded, with pictures, old ones, buildings, people. She said one day I'd understand why she kept them. Nathaniel's throat tightened. Do you remember what was in them? One picture she looked at a lot. It was a man. Sarah's voice grew softer, like she was walking back into a dream she didn't want to return to. He looked like you, she said. He's part of why. The nurse stepped in quietly to check her vitals, then left again, just as silently. Nathaniel leaned back, mind racing. A man who looked like him, a box of photos, a girl running through the snow to the only building she'd seen in those photos. Couldn't be a coincidence. Sarah's voice pulled him back. I saw him. Nathaniel looked up. Who? The man with the knife. Mommy fell down, and he turned and saw me on the stairs. His eyes were wrong. She was staring at the wall now. He said, Come here, little girl. Daddy needs to talk to you. Nathaniel's blood ran cold. He stood and walked slowly to her bedside, sat on the edge. You don't have to tell me everything, he said gently. Not unless you want to. Her eyes turned to his. They were impossibly deep, too deep for 5. But you're the only one listening, she whispered. That's when the detective returned. Ray Morrison, clipboard in hand. Coat still dusted with snow. Mr. Harper, I need a moment. Nathaniel rose reluctantly. In the hallway, Ray's voice was low and grim. There's been a break in the case. Nathaniel braced himself. We identified the mother, Diana Thompson. Single stab wound. Scene looked staged, like someone wanted it to look like a robbery, but nothing was taken. There were little footprints in the snow, leading out through the bedroom window. He looked at Nathaniel hard. Your building is 35 blocks away. In this storm, there's no way she should have made it to you. I don't know what to tell you, Nathaniel said. She said she ran, that she saw my building and thought it looked safe. Detective Morrison studied him. Funny thing is, her mother used to work for a company connected to yours a long time ago. There's overlap, old contracts, records from Harper Construction. Nathaniel's breath caught. My father's company? Morrison nodded. And there's more. We found a newspaper clipping in Diana's house, a recent one, about your acquisition of the Morrison Group. She circled your photo. The detective added, and wrote one thing in the margin. He'll pay for what his family did to us. Nathaniel felt the air leave his lungs. He turned, looking through the glass, at the little girl, sitting upright in bed, knees drawn to her chest. Her face was unreadable now, like she'd gone somewhere else in her mind. She knew where to go. Morrison said, She didn't end up at your door by accident. Nathaniel didn't answer, because deep down, something inside him already knew. She hadn't been running randomly through the snow. She'd been running towards something, and whatever that something was, it lived in his past. Chapter 3. The Man Who Fell. The study hadn't changed much since his father died. Same dust-covered trophies on the bookshelf. Same oil painting of Grandview Tower, his father's proudest project, still hanging above the fireplace. And the desk? That massive oak thing. The kind of furniture built to outlast the men who sat behind it. Nathaniel ran his hand over the smooth surface. It smelled faintly of old paper and ink and something colder, like secrecy. He'd come home from the hospital at dawn. Margaret hadn't stirred. She didn't ask where he'd been, didn't even look up from her tablet as he passed through the kitchen. Their silence had long since hardened into routine, but Sarah's eyes haunted him, not just the fear, but the knowing. Now, he sat where his father once had, facing shelves of manila folders, legal documents, property deeds, settlement agreements, all organized, all labeled, and all suspiciously incomplete. He opened a drawer marked 2009 and started reading. That year had been chaotic. Grandview Tower's steel frame had barely finished rising when tragedy struck. A safety inspector, Thomas Richardson, had fallen from the 32nd floor. There'd been a hearing, OSHA reports. The official story had called it a tragic accident. But Nathaniel remembered the whispers. Corners were cut. Equipment failed. Someone had warned them. No one listened. Back then, he'd just come out of Harvard Business School, too consumed with projections and expansion to care about a name buried in a memo. Now that name burned on every page. Thomas Richardson. He kept flipping. Pages grew thinner. Less ink. Fewer details. And then something fell out. A letter, handwritten, creased and yellowed with time. He unfolded it with care. A woman's handwriting, elegant but angry. Mr. Harper, I know what really happened on that site. Thomas told me about the defective harnesses, the warnings he gave your team, and how you ignored him. I know you paid off the inspectors. I know what your silence cost me. I am not going away. Our child deserves to know what kind of man her father was, not the lie the newspapers printed. Diana Johnson. Nathaniel sat back slowly. That name again? Diana. Sarah's mother. His chest tightened. He kept searching. At the very bottom of the file, he found a second letter, short, in his father's handwriting. Miss Johnson, you're grieving. I understand that, but I suggest you consider what dragging this out will do to your child. The settlement we're offering is generous. Let your daughter have a chance at a normal life. Some truths are better left buried. Nathaniel dropped the pages as if they'd burned his fingers. There it was, quiet, measured, a threat wrapped in sympathy. He pushed the drawer shut and leaned forward, hands over his face. His father hadn't just ignored warnings. He'd buried them, along with a man's life, along with a woman's grief. And now, her child had shown up at his doorstep, shaking in the snow. Not a stranger, not a coincidence. A living thread pulling at every corner of a lie he hadn't known he was part of. His phone buzzed. A message from Detective Morrison. We need to talk. Found something you'll want to see. Nathaniel replied. I'm coming. But before he stood, he looked around the study again. At the desk, the tower painting, the framed photo of him and his father at the Grandview ribbon cutting. In that picture, his father had one arm around him and the other resting on Thomas Richardson's shoulder. The man who fell, the man his father smiled with hours before he died. Outside, snow was falling again, soft, steady, quiet like guilt. Nathaniel put on his coat and left the house for the second time in 2 days, not as a CEO, but as a man standing at the edge of a truth he could no longer ignore. Chapter 4. The Father in the Shadow. Bellevue Hospital didn't feel like a hospital, not this wing. The walls were pale green, like they'd tried to choose a color that said healing, but forgot to make it feel human. Everything smelled like bleach, and something older, regret maybe. Security guards stood at each end of the hallway, their hands near holsters, their eyes unmoved. Nathaniel Harper didn't belong here. He was still wearing the same coat from the night before. He hadn't slept. He hadn't shaved. The usual silk collar perfection was long gone. The only thing still crisp about him was the way his name had been spoken on the phone that morning. He asked for you by name. The detective had said, Marcus Thompson wants to confess, but only if you're in the room. Now, he stood just outside that room. The man inside Marcus was the one Sarah had called the man with the big knife. But when Nathaniel stepped in, He didn't see a monster. He saw a man, broken. Marcus sat propped up in a hospital bed, wrists wrapped in white gauze. His eyes were dark-rimmed, bloodshot, hollow, but not dangerous. Not now. Not anymore. He looked up. There was no surprise in his expression. "You look like your father," he said hoarsely. Nathaniel stayed standing. "You said you wanted to confess." Detective Morrison sat across the room. Recorder already running, jaw tight. He hadn't said much since they walked in, but Nathaniel could see it. The tremble in his hand, the unspoken anger. This case was personal to everyone now. Marcus leaned back against the pillow. "Yeah, I killed her." The room held its breath. "But not because I hated her," Marcus said. "I killed Diana because I loved her." Nathaniel's heart pounded once in his ears. "That doesn't make sense." Marcus gave a bitter laugh. "None of it makes sense. Not unless you know what she found." Detective Morrison leaned forward. "Tell us." So Marcus did. He told them about the box Diana had found hidden in Harold Harper's old study. "Mamnishan, mesfam, that the Yermis, the shipaf." I saw the letters begin, the photos, the surveillance footage no one knew existed taken from a camera across the street from Grandview Tower. It showed Thomas Richardson didn't fall, Marcus said. He was pushed by the man standing next to him, his partner. Nathaniel felt his mouth go dry. Morrison froze. Marcus didn't blink. "Detective Jimmy Morrison," he said quietly. "Your father." The silence was thick, electric. Morrison didn't move, didn't even breathe. "I didn't believe it at first." Marcus continued. "But Diana, she had proof, testimonies, a copy of the confession letter Jimmy wrote, hidden in his desk. Your father went to Harold Harper that night, begging for help, told him he was drunk, jealous, didn't mean to do it." Nathaniel closed his eyes. He could see it, his father pacing in this very room, deciding whether to expose a cop or use him. "Harold made a deal," Marcus said. "Here in Nittenzinor, Nisura. And in exchange for the cover-up, Jimmy Morrison gave him insider access zoning approvals, land sales, protected bids. That's how your father built the empire." Mr. Harper on a corpse and a handshake. Nathaniel couldn't breathe. His mind reached back to every award Harper Industries had ever won, every article that praised his father's brilliance, every photograph that had once made him proud, all of it, soaked in someone else's silence. Diana wanted to go public. Marcus said, wanted to burn it all down. "So you killed her," Morrison said sharply. "No," Marcus whispered. "I killed her because I knew what it would do to Sarah." His voice cracked then. His shoulders shook. "She's already lost so much. I couldn't let her lose the little innocence she had left." Nathaniel couldn't stand it anymore. "You killed her to protect her." "I killed her to protect what was left of her." The words echoed like a confession in a church with no God. From the hallway, someone knocked softly on the door. A nurse peeked in, her voice cautious. "Excuse me, but the little girl, Sarah, she just woke up, and she's asking for the man who helped her." Nathaniel stood. His chair scraped against the floor. "She won't talk to anyone else." The nurse added, "Just you." Behind him, Morrison's voice followed. "Everything she says now could be evidence, if she knows more." "I know," Nathaniel replied without turning around. "But I'm not walking in there as a CEO." He stepped into the hallway. The scent of antiseptic didn't seem so harsh anymore. The floor didn't echo so sharply under his shoes. He was walking toward a little girl who had run to him, barefoot, through the snow, because she thought he looked like someone who might help. He only hoped she was right. Chapter 5. Warehouse C. The warehouse sat at the edge of Queens like a ghost, too stubborn to disappear. Gray steel bones, rusted siding, and a chain-link fence that flinched in the wind. The address had come in a text message from an untraceable number. Pierre Quartzy said, "Warehouse C, come alone, or Sarah pays for your family's sins." Nathaniel drove through snow-heavy streets, each turn slower than the last. His hands were tight on the wheel. His heart was louder than the engine. Beside him, Detective Morrison sat in silence. His service weapon was in his lap, but he hadn't touched it since they left the safe house. He was pale, unshaven. Something inside him had cracked 2 nights ago when he learned his father hadn't just failed to protect. He'd killed. "This could be a trap," Morrison said again. "It is," Nathaniel replied, "but Sarah's inside." They parked near the gate. A single camera blinked down at them. No guards, no movement. "We go in together," Nathaniel said, but slowly. "No guns drawn unless absolutely necessary." Morrison gave a single nod. Then they stepped inside. The warehouse door creaked open like it hadn't been used in years. But inside, it was lived in. Warm lights glowed from makeshift lamps, rugs over concrete, a table with crayons and coloring books, toys, bottled water, clean towels, and Sarah, she sat cross-legged at the small table, coloring. She looked up. Her brown eyes lit up the second she saw him. "Nate." She started to rise, but a woman's voice stopped her cold. "Stay where you are, sweetheart." Deanna. At least, that's who Nathaniel thought she was. But something was wrong. She stepped out from behind a partition. Same face, same voice, but sharper now, brittle like glass stretched too thin. "Welcome to the truth," she said. "This is where it ends." In one hand, she held a remote. In the other, a gun. The warehouse was rigged. Explosives wired into beams. A detonation countdown linked to the remote in her hand. "If I don't input the override every 30 minutes, she said calmly, "this place becomes ash." Nathaniel tried to stay calm. Sarah was watching. Every word, every movement. "You don't have to do this," he said softly. "Don't I?" she snapped. "Your father destroyed my life. His silence killed Thomas. His money buried the truth." Morrison stepped forward, hands raised. "And killing a child will fix that." Her jaw tightened. "Thomas was my brother, my only family, and I watched him fall through a grainy black and white video. Do you have any idea what that does to a person?" Nathaniel's breath caught. "You're Diana's sister." She nodded. "Rebecca Johnson, mental illness, foster care, name changes. They made it easy to vanish. When Diana died in childbirth, I did what no one else would. I raised her daughter. I became her mother, because Thomas's legacy deserved that much. But you lied to her," Nathaniel said, "and now she's in the middle of something she can't understand." Rebecca's hands trembled. "She understands more than you think." Nathaniel turned to Sarah, who was still sitting quietly at the table. Calm, watching. "Sweetheart," he said gently, "do you know who this woman is?" Sarah blinked. "She's not my mommy." Rebecca flinched. "My mommy had a scar on her hand from when she cut it on my birthday cake. This lady doesn't." Mommy always smelled like cinnamon. She doesn't. Nathaniel felt a lump in his throat. Morrison's eyes softened. Mommy said, "Scared feelings were just feelings, and they couldn't really hurt me," Sarah whispered. "But I'm scared right now. So I think this isn't just a feeling." Rebecca's hand faltered. "You know," Sarah continued, "you're not really my mommy, but you did love me. You brought me books. You made up stories. You cried when you thought I was sleeping. Then why won't you let me go now?" The silence was so heavy. It pressed on their lungs. Rebecca looked at her, really looked, and for the first time since they arrived, the gun dropped just slightly. Marcus was in the corner, tied to a beam, bruised but alive. He spoke now, voice raw. "Rebecca, stop. She's not your revenge." She turned sharply. "You lied too. You let her believe things that weren't true." "We all did," Marcus said. "But Sarah's the only one here who never asked for any of this." His eyes found hers. Sweetheart, it's okay. You're safe. Nathaniel stepped forward. Rebecca, he said gently, what happened to Thomas wasn't your fault. But what happens next is. She looked at him, then at Sarah. The remote shook in her hand. I don't know who I am anymore, she whispered. Then let her remind you, Nathaniel said. Let the little girl who loved you show you how to start over. A long pause. Then Sarah stood, walked across the warehouse, straight to Rebecca. She reached out, took the remote from her hand like it was nothing more than a television clicker. How do I turn it off? She asked calmly. Rebecca stared at her, wide-eyed. You don't know how. I do, Sarah said softly. You showed me how numbers work. She pressed 3 buttons. The countdown disappeared. A green light blinked in its place. Silence. Then a sound none of them expected. Rebecca weeping. She crumpled to the floor, hands covering her face. I was so angry, she sobbed. I didn't know how else to hurt the people who hurt him. Nathaniel knelt beside Sarah, held her close. You did more than hurt them, he whispered. You tried to become them. Sarah leaned into him. Her small voice trembled. I just wanted her to stop being sad. Nathaniel closed his eyes, and for the first time in a long time, he prayed not for justice, not for power, but for peace, for a child who had survived lies, violence, and grief, and still knew how to disarm a bomb. Chapter 6. The green light. The blinking stopped. One small green light, steady and soft, glowed from the side of the disarmed detonator. A light that meant everything was still standing. A light that said they could breathe. Sarah had done it. The 5-year-old girl in the blue cardigan. The girl who used crayons like armor. The girl who had run barefoot through snow and whispered, he has a knife. She was the one who'd stopped it all. Nathaniel held her against his chest, one arm cradling her back, the other gently shielding her eyes from the wires and exposed metal still hanging from the warehouse beams. Behind them, Rebecca had collapsed in a heap. She wasn't crying anymore, just sitting, rocking slightly, her arms wrapped around her knees like she was trying to hold her bones together. Detective Morrison knelt nearby, his notebook forgotten. I didn't think she'd actually do it, he whispered. She was going to... with Sarah, right here. Nathaniel's voice came out rough. She thought it was justice. He looked at Sarah, still quiet, still watching, and Sarah gave her grace. Federal agents arrived not long after. Morrison had radioed them once the detonator was disarmed. Now the warehouse buzzed with voices, flashlights, radios, handcuffs, body cams. Rebecca didn't resist. She didn't run. When they led her away, Sarah stood at the edge of the door, holding Nathaniel's hand. Rebecca looked back once. She still thinks I loved her, she said softly. You did, Nathaniel answered. But love without truth becomes something else. Rebecca nodded, just once, then disappeared into the dark. Hours passed. Sarah curled on a bench in the precinct interview room, one hand still clutching a purple crayon. Morrison sat across from her, his badge resting on the table. You okay, kid? He asked. She nodded, tired. You've been really brave. Another nod, then softly. I'm not scared anymore. Nathaniel watched them from the hallway, coffee in hand, untouched. His mind raced, but his heart felt strangely still. Detective Morrison stepped out beside him. She's incredible. Nathaniel nodded. She is. Listen, there's something else, Morrison said, rubbing the back of his neck. We ran DNA on the hospital records. Standard procedure in child recovery cases. Nathaniel turned, and she's not Marcus Thompson's daughter. We already suspected that, Nathaniel said. Thomas Richardson, right? Morrison hesitated. No. A pause. She's not Thomas's either. Nathaniel blinked. Then who? The detective handed him a folder. Inside, test results, notes, dates, and one name, Harold James Harper. Nathaniel stared. My father. Morrison nodded. Sarah is your half-sister. The hallway went quiet. Quieter than it should have been. Nathaniel heard nothing. Not footsteps. Not chatter. Not even the hum of the vending machine down the hall. Just the rush of blood in his ears. He knew. Nathaniel whispered. All these years, he knew she existed. Morrison didn't answer. He didn't have to. Sarah was born 9 months after the settlement with Diana Johnson. A grieving woman. A powerful man who needed her silence. And now, the daughter neither of them had ever truly claimed. Nathaniel's hand dropped to his side. The folder hung limp in his grasp. He abandoned her, he murmured, and she still ran toward his name when she needed help. Morrison's voice was quiet. Maybe she wasn't running toward him. Nathaniel looked up. Maybe she was running toward you. Later that morning, when the sun began to rise, pale and tired over the Manhattan skyline, Nathaniel found Sarah in the safe house living room, curled up in a blanket. He sat beside her. I learned something today, he said gently. She didn't speak. Do you want to know who your real daddy was? She looked up slowly, eyes wide, uncertain. It was my dad. Nathaniel whispered. That makes you my sister. Her lips parted. She studied him, blinked once, twice. But you're not mean like him, she said. No, he replied. At least, I hope I'm not. She leaned into his side, small and warm and real. I like being your sister, she murmured. You came back. That makes you mine. Nathaniel didn't say anything. He just held her, tighter than before, as if the green light still blinking from the past meant something for their future. Chapter 7. The girl who told the truth. They were safe now. Or at least, that's what the federal agents said. But even inside the quiet safe house tucked into a sleepy cul-de-sac in Connecticut, surrounded by reinforced glass and 24-hour surveillance, Nathaniel didn't feel safe. Not really. Not when the people he used to have brunch with might be part of something that now wanted Sarah dead. She slept in the room beside his, curled up with a new stuffed rabbit a nurse had given her. She'd named it Crayons and whispered to it each night, like it held all her secrets. Nathaniel stayed awake. He stared at the ceiling, the memory of green light flickering in his mind, not from the detonator, but from Sarah's face in the glow of it. Calm, steady, unafraid, like she had already lived through the worst. The next morning, over a bowl of cereal and sliced bananas, she asked him the question that had been quietly building in the silence between them. Are we telling people? He blinked. Telling people what, sweetheart? She didn't look up, just stirred the cereal slowly. About the buildings and the people your daddy paid. He set down his coffee, his stomach twisted. Yes, he said quietly, we're working on it, but it's complicated. Why? He exhaled through his nose, slow and tired, because the people who helped cover it all up, they still have power. They have lawyers. They can make things disappear. She finally looked at him, and her eyes, they weren't a 5-year-old's eyes. They were the eyes of a girl who had watched too much, survived too much. But we're not lying, right? He shook his head. No, we're not lying. Then the truth should win. He smiled sadly. It should. She went back to stirring her cereal. Okay, then we tell. That afternoon, Nathaniel sat in a federal meeting room, surrounded by prosecutors, agents, and media advisors. Morrison was there too, his badge clipped to his jacket like a weight. Rebecca's evidence had been cataloged. The FBI confirmed it. Years of financial records, taped phone calls, bribery ledgers, even voice memos Harold Harper had left for himself, like a criminal journaling his sins. The question wasn't if it was real. The question was, what would happen if the world found out? We're talking billions of dollars in dirty money, said Agent Williams. International developers, corrupt city officials, construction deaths swept under the rug. If we go public now, The lead prosecutor added, "We can't take it back." Everyone becomes a target, including Sarah. Nathaniel's jaw tightened. She's already a target. Across the room, Morrison nodded. Then maybe we stop whispering in corners and give her the justice she's already risked her life for. Justice isn't simple. Someone said. No, Morrison replied, but neither is she. That night, Nathaniel told Sarah everything about the press conference, the headlines that were coming, the risks. She didn't cry. She didn't panic. She just crawled into his lap and whispered, "If we don't tell, more kids will get hurt, right?" He nodded. Probably. Then we tell. 2 days later, the room was packed. News cameras, reporters, victims' families. Sarah's picture was already everywhere. A little girl in a blue dress with wide brown eyes and a voice that carried more weight than anyone expected. She stood beside Nathaniel at the podium. The crowd hushed. She took a breath. "Hi, my name is Sarah Harper, and I want to tell you what happened." She spoke for less than 5 minutes. But in that time, something shifted. She talked about love, about lies, about being scared. "I didn't know who I was for a long time. But then I found my brother, and he helped me feel safe." She looked up at Nathaniel and smiled. "And now, I think the best way to feel safe is to tell the truth." The room was silent. Reporters blinked back tears. Federal agents stood taller. Nathaniel's heart cracked open in a way that felt strangely like healing. That night, back at the safe house, they sat on the couch with warm cocoa and fuzzy socks. The storm outside raged again. Another blizzard, another night. But this time, no one was running barefoot into the dark. "Night?" Sarah asked. "Yeah, did I do okay?" He looked at her, the girl who told the truth when no one else would. The girl who disarmed bombs with crayons and love. "You saved us," he said. She leaned her head against his arm and finally, closed her eyes. Chapter 8. The night the storm returned. The storm rolled in the same way it had that first night. Not loud, not fast, just inevitable. Wind pressed against the windows, like a memory clawing its way back. Snow fell in thick, slow spirals like the sky was remembering something it wished it could forget. Inside the safe house, Sarah slept peacefully, one arm draped over crayons. The rabbit. A nightlight glowed faint blue near her pillow. Nathaniel watched her for a long time before quietly pulling the door shut. He hadn't turned on the news all day. He didn't need to. The fallout from the press conference had exploded. Harper Industries was under federal investigation. 3 city officials had resigned. Stockholders were panicking. But the message was clear. The girl had spoken. The world had listened. Still, something wasn't right. Nathaniel could feel it. A wrongness beneath the silence, like a breath being held too long. At 2:47 M. It came. The front security alarm blared once, then went silent. Too fast, too clean. Nathaniel sat upright on the couch, the throw blanket falling to the floor. His phone was dead. Strange, he'd charged it hours ago. The lights flickered, then died. He moved quickly, quietly, checked the cameras on the hallway panel. Black screen, all of them. Someone had cut power. The generator hadn't kicked in. No, someone had disabled it. He grabbed the emergency flashlight from the kitchen drawer and moved to Sarah's door. She was still asleep. Safe. He gently, quietly scooped her up, whispering into her hair, "It's okay. We're going somewhere else." "Sweetheart." She stirred, but didn't resist. Her arms curled around his neck instinctively. She always trusted him first. Downstairs, the front door was cracked open. Snow blew in sideways, dusting the hardwood floor like ash. There were no guards at the post. No movement outside. Nathaniel's gut clenched. He turned toward the panic room and froze. A figure stood in the hallway. Tall, hooded, silent. Nathaniel's voice was low and steady. "What do you want?" The figure stepped forward slowly. No weapon visible, but the intent hung heavy in the air. And then he spoke. "You shouldn't have opened your mouth." The voice was familiar, too familiar. Nathaniel's stomach dropped. "Foster Reynolds," he said. "Former COO of Harper Industries, his father's oldest friend. The man who'd quietly vanished from the board 2 years ago after health reasons and an undisclosed settlement." "You knew," Nathaniel said. "I built it," Foster growled, "and you let a child tear it down." Nathaniel stepped back, shielding Sarah with his body. Her breath warmed his collarbone. "It wasn't her," he said. "It was all of us. We let this rot grow. You think you're noble now. You think truth buys forgiveness." Foster stepped closer. Nathaniel saw the glint of something in his hand. Not a gun, a phone. "This house goes dark and then burns," he said. "You were warned." Nathaniel's voice was a whisper, "Not with her inside." That's exactly why Nathaniel ran. He sprinted for the panic room, keying in the code with one hand while holding Sarah tight with the other. Behind him, he heard a click, then a shriek of fire, gas. Foster had triggered the failsafe. He'd come not just to threaten, but to erase. The panic door slammed shut behind them. Seconds before, the hallway erupted in flames. Inside the steel room, Sarah clung to his shirt, coughing. Emergency oxygen hissed to life. Lights flickered on. "Are we gonna die?" she asked, voice shaking. "No," he said quickly. "No, baby, we're safe." She looked up at him. "Is it 'cause I told?" His chest broke in half. "No," he whispered, brushing her hair back. "It's because you were brave, and brave people scare cowards." He wrapped her in the emergency blanket, rocked her gently. Outside, the house burned. Inside, the truth stayed alive. 3 hours later, they were pulled from the wreckage. Sarah was unharmed. Nathaniel had minor burns on his hands, the kind that hurt more from memory than flame. Foster Reynolds was caught a mile from the scene, trying to disappear, but there were too many witnesses now, too many stories, and one little girl, who had already saved the world once, now had a brother willing to burn for her. Chapter 9. What Family Means. 3 weeks passed. The snow melted slowly, leaving patches of gray along the sidewalks and rooftops. Winter was loosening its grip, but the cold still lingered in the corners of the air. And in Nathaniel's chest, the safe house was gone. But a new place had been found. Smaller, quieter, just outside the city. There were no guards, no cameras, just a porch with peeling paint and a maple tree in the front yard that bent in the wind like it remembered how to bow. It wasn't a fortress. It was a beginning. Sarah adjusted quickly. She always did. Her days were filled with puzzles and pancakes, cartoons and court dates. There was still a team of lawyers handling the Harper legacy scandal, but Nathaniel stopped calling it that. It's not a legacy if it's built on silence, he'd said. The Harper Foundation was dissolved. In its place, the Sarah Project, a fund created to help children like her, those caught in the crossfire of power and lies, a truth-telling grant, a voice amplifier. Sarah didn't care about any of that. She just wanted to know if her bunny crayons could have a matching scarf. One afternoon, after a walk to the bookstore, they came home to find a letter tucked into the doorframe. No return address. Nathaniel's heart jumped, but when he opened it, his shoulders sagged with something that looked like relief. Inside, a single photograph. It was of Thomas Richardson, Diana, and baby Sarah bundled in a hospital blanket, all three smiling like they'd borrowed joy from a better world. And on the back, in gentle handwriting, "Family is not who you are born to. It's who stays when the fire comes. Thank you for staying, R." Nathaniel didn't cry, but he sat down on the porch steps, and stared at the sky for a long time. That night, over warm soup and cornbread, Sarah asked, "Do you miss him?" "Your dad." Nathaniel hesitated. "I miss the idea of him, who I thought he was, but not the real one." He nodded. "Not the man who left you behind." She thought about that for a while. Then she said, "I think you're the real one now." "The real what?" "The real Harper." Nathaniel's throat caught. "Because you picked me." And we stayed. Later, before bed, she brushed her teeth and lined up her crayons like soldiers on the sink. She looked at him in the mirror. "Do I call you brother or dad?" Nathaniel knelt beside her. "You call me whatever makes you feel safe." She nodded seriously, then leaned in, kissed his cheek. "Okay, Dad." That night, after she fell asleep, he walked into the living room and stood by the window. The maple tree swayed in the wind again, and for the first time in years, he felt whole. Not because the world had been fixed, but because someone had looked at him scars, mistakes, burned hands and all, and still said, "You stayed. You're mine." That's what family meant. Chapter 10. The last page. The spring came slowly, first with the thaw, then with the green shoots rising from old soil, as if even the ground itself had decided not to give up this year. Sarah's laugh came more often now. It filled the hallway when her feet slapped the floor in the mornings. It echoed down the sidewalk as she chased bubbles from the neighbor's porch. And sometimes, when she was asleep, it slipped out in her dreams, soft, surprised, like joy was still new to her. Nathaniel kept every sound like a secret in his pocket, because there had been nights, not long ago, when he wasn't sure she'd ever laugh again. She sat at the kitchen table with a stack of construction paper one April afternoon. "I'm writing my book," she said. "You are." Nathaniel smiled, setting down his coffee. "What's it called?" "The Girl Who Ran in the Snow." His hands froze around the mug. She didn't notice, just kept drawing. She was scared, but she ran anyway. And she met people who were scared too, but they helped each other. And then she wasn't scared anymore. Nathaniel swallowed. His voice came out low. "How does it end?" Sarah looked up at him, her brown eyes steady. "With a porch," she said, "and pancakes, and a brother who stayed." 2 weeks later, the publishing house called The Story had gone viral. A small publisher asked if they could turn Sarah's courtroom testimony and the events surrounding it into a children's book with her permission. Nathaniel asked her, "They want to tell your story, only if they keep the bunny in it," she said seriously. Crayons was really brave. On the first day of summer, they held a small launch event at a local school. Children gathered in a semicircle around Sarah, who sat on a reading chair with her sneakers barely touching the ground. Nathaniel sat beside her, heart pounding, like he was the one on stage. She opened the first page and began. "Once there was a girl who ran through snow. She was small, but her truth was big." The children listened, wide-eyed, quiet. And when she got to the last page, she looked up and said, "And the best part is, she's okay now. She's got pancakes." And someone who stays after the applause, a little boy, came up to her. He looked no older than 4. "Were you scared?" Sarah nodded. "Yeah." "Did the bad people go away?" "Some of them," she said. "But even if they don't, the truth is louder now." He smiled. "I like your bunny. He likes you too." Nathaniel watched from a distance. His throat was tight again, but this time, he didn't mind. That night, back home, Sarah tucked herself in. Crayons. The bunny had a new scarf. The porch light glowed like always. She looked up from bed. "Nate." "Yeah." "If Mommy's in heaven, do you think she saw me read?" He nodded. "I think she's proud of every word." She closed her eyes. Then that was a good story. And just like that, the girl who once ran barefoot into the night now slept safe. In the house she called her own. No bombs, no lies, just a last page and a porch light left on. The porch light, the camera lingers, The sun has just set. The world outside is quiet, bathed in that soft indigo glow between day and night. Inside the little house, the dishes are washed, the toys are scattered, and a girl with a brave heart sleeps under a blue quilt, her hand curled gently around a stuffed bunny. Out on the porch, Nathaniel Harper sits alone with a mug of lukewarm tea. He's not the man he used to be, not the billionaire CEO, not the son of a legacy, just a man who learned that love isn't what you inherit, it's what you choose. And keep choosing. A gentle breeze stirs the wind chimes. He looks up at the porch light still glowing, still waiting. He smiles, quietly, because this isn't the end. It's just the last page of this story. And some stories are worth reading over and over again. Thank you for joining us in this true love story. One that began with fear, but ended in found family, healing, and the kind of love that doesn't ask to be earned, only held on to. If this story touched your heart, tell us in the comments, what was your favorite moment? And how would you rate this story from 0 to 10? We'd love to hear your thoughts. And if you believe in stories that help us feel seen, heard, and healed, don't miss out on more like this. Tap subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss another love story, bedtime story, or life story that just might stay with you. Because sometimes the most powerful stories are the ones we almost didn't hear. Watch our latest stories here. And don't miss out. Click now to watch more. We'll leave the porch light on for you.